What's up, guys? It's the Football Take Slayer back here again to slay another terrible take. Today we're focusing in on Mark Goldbridge and just, again, man, his takes when it comes to Manchester United, I just never understand them. And it's almost like he just comes from the idea that Manchester United, it's just like a privilege thing. It's like Manchester United aren't in a rebuild. Manchester United didn't just finish in the bottom half of the table. And he just says things that I genuinely don't understand. So in this video, you could see Mark Goldbridge saying that he would be done with Manchester United if they signed Nicolas Jackson. You can listen in to these clips.
Manchester United are considering a move for Nicolas Jackson, whose future is in doubt at Chelsea. I cannot tell you how horrific this deal would be. You know, I don't like sharks, and at the end of Jaws, where he falls down the boat into the mouth and is, you know, if you've seen it, it's horrific. This is more horrific than that. If we sign Nicolas Jackson, we're more done than a porn star doing a 100-to-1 challenge. We are...
Okay, so the overreaction from someone like Mark Goldbridge, who has been around for so long, who has watched Manchester United for so long, who they've had signings where they don't even have as much Premier League ability or Premier League experience or even any resemblance of any sort of resemblance of a resume like Nicolas Jackson could have. They've signed players that nobody's known and they've turned into great players. And to act like Nicolas Jackson is just such a terrible player and that Manchester United are above him for some reason, I truly don't understand the perspective he has on football. And again, I think it comes down to not actually watching the games. So instead of forming his own opinion, he sees people online making jokes and memes that Jackson is the worst player ever, so he also runs along with the easy and popular narrative because he doesn't even watch these games to formulate his own opinion. It'd be harder to come out here and say, hey, go against the... Hey, Nicolas Jackson, he's not that bad of a player. He's actually a pretty good player. And to go out there and go against the masses and be honest with yourself and watch the games and say, wait, Nicolas Jackson, his movement is great. His IQ is great. Him getting his XG is great. Him putting himself in great positions. He's great. And he came here raw and young, and now he has 2 seasons in the Prem. I think it's hard for Mark Goldbridge to go against the narrative and go against the popular opinion because he's scared of being wrong. And then if the popular opinion is wrong, he could just fall back on, hey, we were all saying he was bad. We're all saying it, so, no one was right. Nicolas Jackson is a really good player, and he might be the type of business that I talk about all the time. That would be smart and savvy, but not sexy and glamorous, that Manchester United need. Nicolas Jackson was purchased by Chelsea 2 seasons ago for around $35 million. Manchester United might be able and should be able to get him in the realms of around $40 million, especially now with the signing of Liam Delap and João Pedro. Jackson is the odd one out in that team, and Chelsea are going to want to sell him now while he still holds some value instead of waiting a season and having him decrease in value. This is literally a smart and savvy signing. Someone you could bring in for only around 40 mil. You can still spend money on other positions like a 6 that is so necessary for the squad. And the sale of Anthony or even Højlund basically can fund this entire transfer where you're getting a 24-year-old striker with 2 seasons already in the Prem, still not even in his prime. And I don't understand the narrative at all when it comes to Nicolas Jackson being bad and the hyperbole of it, of if he signs, it's the worst thing ever. This is a kid who came over to the hardest league in the world at 22 and had 14 goals and 5 assists in 35 appearances for Chelsea. That is a really good return. That's a really good return for your striker, especially at the age of 22 in his first season. That's a better output than Liam Delap, that the player that Manchester United fans were drooling over this window. Last season, he only played 30 games, Nicolas Jackson, the season before this last season, and he scored 10 goals and had 5 assists in the Prem. Again, that really isn't bad. That's a goal contribution every other game, and it's much better than what Manchester United have at this current moment. This is a player who's physically strong, has pace, and has great movement. I understand the critique on his finishing ability the last 2 seasons, But again, he moved to the hardest league at the age of 22. He's now had 2 years of experience. I'm sure the finishing will progressively get better. And one thing is for certain, it can't be worse than Højlund's finishing. And that is another thing. You could basically sell Højlund for 40 mil and instantly replace him with a young, exciting forward for the same price. So if you actually think Højlund's time is finished at Manchester United, well, you now don't need to get an old stopgap striker for a year because of how bad the market is. You could still get a young striker with potential for the same amount of money. And just to show that Nicolas Jackson is a good player, here is a chart showing his stats. The last season, which was his worst season out of the two he spent at Chelsea, he was still in the top 80th percentile when it comes to non-penalty XG, which shows he is getting and putting himself in the right position and understanding where he should be to score goals, which is so important for strikers. There are some strikers that just don't even put themselves in the position to score. He was also in the top 84th percentile when it comes to expected assists, which helps players like Cole Palmer that everyone loves have the ability to score more goals, which doesn't get discussed enough. He's a pretty unselfish striker. And again, some people see that as a negative, and I slightly do too. I think you want your striker to be selfish. You want him to be ruthless. But you also want him to have somewhat of football IQ to know when it is the time to be ruthless and when is the time to lay it off and get the assist. And I think Nicolas Jackson needs to get a little bit more ruthless, but at least he still compensates that lack of ruthlessness with just a great understanding of football and making the right pass. And if you go back to his first year in the Prem, he was in the 91st percentile when it comes to non-penalty XG. At the age of 22 in his first season in the Prem, that is not easy. And he had great seasons over in La Liga. But the season that Chelsea purchased him, the year in La Liga, he scored 12 goals. He's been scoring double-digit goals now for, I think it's been 3 seasons minimum. That is better than literally what Liverpool strikers last season did. Diogo Jota scored about like 6 goals, I believe, and in the Prem, and I don't even know what Darwin Núñez scored, but I know it wasn't double digits. So you have a player that is scoring double-digit goals. His XG is through the roof every single season, and he's still really young, and you could get him for 40 million. Now look at this chart where I compare Nicolas Jackson's stats to Jon Wissa, a player that Manchester United fans were saying would be a good signing, and that Newcastle, who just finished 4th place, are being linked with. These charts are very, very similar. But the difference is Nicolas Jackson is 4 years younger than Wissa. They have relatively the same XG, and Newcastle are being linked with Wissa for relatively the same price of 40 mil. So what would you rather have? A younger player who's now had 2 seasons in the Prem, or Wissa, who's 28 and had 1 good season, or in Mark Goldbridge's case, neither, and just complain about any striker who isn't worth 100 million plus and isn't just clickbait worthy? I've said it once, and I'll say it again. Manchester United are in a rebuild. This isn't the time to be signing sexy players that the fans go delirious over and spending 120 million per player. This is the time to start being smart and savvy and signing players that most other teams have given up on or don't think are a necessity, and bringing them into your squad and building a good, healthy squad. Think Callum Wilson at Newcastle. They had Alexander Isak, but they still brought in Callum Wilson, who wasn't a standout, but was still really, really good at his time. I think he was in, I can't remember the team he was at. I think it was Brentford. But they purchased him from Brentford. They pick up Callum Wilson. He scored around like 12 goals the season before they purchased him. And they buy him for 20 million, and he was able to back up Alexander Isak, even sometimes start, and still provide goal-scoring output. Were Newcastle fans super excited at the signing of Callum Wilson? Of course not. It was a 20 million signing that isn't really sexy, but it was smart and savvy because they were rebuilding to try and get into the Champions League. This is what Manchester United need to do and their fans need to realize. Every signing can't be a Florian Wirtz. It can't be an Alexander Isak. Firstly, you don't have the money for that because you aren't in the Champions League. You need to start making savvy signings. You need to start signing players like a Nicolas Jackson who can come in and guarantee double-digit goal output, and you can get him for $40 million. That is something that will change your project versus spending $100 million on a Sesko who's unproven, just like Højlund was. And if that falls through, if he comes in and he doesn't perform at a high level, just like Højlund didn't, now you're $100 million in the hole, and you still need to fix the striker position. It's smarter in their position right now to just get a guaranteed striker like Nicolas Jackson who will give you 15 to 20 goals, and now you have the backup firepower of Cunha and Mbeumo behind him to secure enough goals to at least finish in the top 8. I think that would be smarter than just going out and spending another 120 mil on a player that you can't even afford and is still relatively unproven. So I think the Mark Goldbridges of the world that don't realize every signing doesn't need to be sexy, but they need to be smart and savvy in these moments so you can go back to being the Manchester United who can spend 100 mil on every single player. That is what these fans aren't understanding. You are in a rebuild. So let me know what you think. Let me know your comments down below. Thank you.